Her young daughter vanished during a simple horseback ride in the woods, disappearing without a trace, as if the forest had swallowed her whole. But 8 years later, at a competition, the mother sees something eerily familiar, something that changes everything. Barbara Whitmore stood at the entrance of the shuttle van, taking a deep breath of the Tuscan air. The crisp morning breeze carried the scent of hay and leather, so familiar yet strangely foreign in this Italian countryside. She adjusted her weathered riding jacket, the same one she'd worn for nearly a decade now, since before Sophie disappeared. "Ms. Whitmore," called Tristan, her most loyal groom, who had stuck with her through the worst years. "The stable manager is waiting." Barbara nodded and stepped onto the gravel path. Around her, the grounds of Siena's prestigious equestrian center buzzed with activity. Riders from across the globe led magnificent horses, while sponsors and judges gathered in small groups, speaking in animated tones. Flags from dozens of nations fluttered overhead, marking the international nature of this off-season Palio di Siena event. "The tack trunk is already at our assigned stall," said Maya, her assistant trainer, falling into step beside her. "And Mira cleared quarantine yesterday afternoon." Barbara's small team from Oregon looked out of place among the polished European entourages with their matching uniforms and corporate sponsors. Her 3 staff members, Tristan, Maya, and young Cole, wore simple navy shirts with the faded Whitmore Stables logo, a reminder of better days. "Let's check on Mira first," Barbara said, following the signs toward the stabling area. As they walked, Barbara couldn't help but remember when Whitmore Stables had been a respected name in the American equestrian community, back when her husband, Richard, was alive, and their daughter, Sophie, spent every free moment with her beloved horse, Willow. But all that changed 8 years ago. The stabling area was a marvel of efficiency, temporary structures that nonetheless conveyed luxury with polished wood and brass fittings. Country flags hung above each stall door, and Barbara found the American flag with Whitmore Stables written on a placard beneath it. Inside, Mira, a magnificent bay mare with a gleaming coat, whickered in recognition at Barbara's approach. The horse had been transported days earlier to acclimate after quarantine. "Hello, beautiful," Barbara whispered, running her hands along Mira's neck, checking for any signs of stress or stiffness from the journey. "How are you holding up?" While Tristan took Mira's temperature, Barbara examined her legs and hooves methodically, finding nothing concerning. Meanwhile, Maya unpacked their equipment. The custom saddle imported from England that cost Barbara more than she could afford. The bridle with its handcrafted stitching, grooming supplies, oils, and their competition attire. "She's perfect," Tristan confirmed. "Temperature normal, hydration good." "Let's walk her," Barbara decided. "Get her moving after all that standing around." As they led Mira through the stable lanes, Barbara took in the competition. Horses worth hundreds of thousands, some even millions of dollars, stood in neighboring stalls. Their handlers spoke in various languages, creating a symphony of international equestrian excellence. Barbara fought back the familiar tightness in her chest. This event was her last chance to save Whitmore Stables. For 8 years, since Sophie and Willow vanished without a trace, the farm had been Barbara's burden rather than her passion. Financial struggles mounted as she lost the will to maintain the business that had once brought her family such joy. Only in the past year had she found the strength to face reality. Without major investment or sponsorship, Whitmore Stables would fold within months. Then came the letter, an invitation from the European Equestrian Federation offering grants to selected American breeders. The all-expenses-paid trip to Siena included flights, accommodation, horse transport, and the opportunity to compete for prestigious breeding partnerships that could revitalize her business. Barbara didn't fully understand why they had selected her modest farm, but she hadn't been in a position to question the blessing. As they turned a corner in the stable complex, Barbara noticed a young blonde girl brushing down a Palomino horse. The girl couldn't have been more than 14 or 15, Sophie's age when she disappeared. Her movements were efficient yet gentle as she braided the horse's mane with practiced fingers. The girl caught Barbara's gaze and smiled warmly. Barbara smiled back automatically, though her heart ached. How many times had she watched Sophie groom Willow just like that, with the familiar braid pattern, the gentle whispers into the horse's ear. For a fleeting moment, Barbara allowed herself to imagine it was them. Ms. Whitmore, Maya's voice pulled her back to reality. The tack inspector will be at our stall in 15 minutes. Right, Barbara said, blinking away the memory. Sophie would be 22 now, not this young girl. Let's head back. They circled the complex once more, giving Mira proper exercise after her journey before returning to their assigned stall. The team worked with seamless coordination, Tristan brushing Mira's coat to a mirror shine, Maya preparing the saddle pad with their competition number, and Cole meticulously cleaning every piece of metal on their tack until it gleamed. Arbarasente supervised as they braided Mira's mane in the traditional dressage style, 43 small, tight braids that would hold perfectly through her performance. The ritual was soothing, familiar, a reminder of why she had once loved this life. Just as they finished, Barbara glanced across the arena to the far ring. A tall man was walking a striking horse, a bay with distinctive white markings. Something about his gait, the way he carried himself, struck Barbara as familiar. "Wait here," she told her team. "I need to check something." "But Ms. Whitmore, the inspector," Maya protested. "I'll be quick," Barbara assured her, already walking toward the far ring. As she drew closer, recognition dawned. The impeccably dressed man with silver-streaked hair and Italian leather boots was Gregorio Duca. Barbara hadn't seen him in years, not since the intensive search for Sophie. Gregorio had owned property neighboring hers in Oregon's Willamette Valley. He had been a fixture in their lives once, Richard's closest friend, a benefactor to their farm, a man who brought expensive wine to dinner and offered sage business advice. After Richard's illness took him, Gregorio had remained present for a while, offering support and kindness. But after Sophie's disappearance, as Barbara retreated into grief, their connection had dissolved. Yet here he was, thousands of miles from Oregon, leading a magnificent horse around a practice ring with the confidence of someone accustomed to moving through the world's most elite circles. Barbara stood at the edge of the ring, watching him for a moment. Gregorio spotted her, and his face lit up with recognition. His wide, charismatic smile hadn't changed at all. "Barbara!" he called out, handing the horse's lead to an assistant and striding toward her. "What an extraordinary surprise!" He embraced her warmly, the familiar scent of his expensive cologne bringing back memories of happier times. "Gregorio," she said, genuinely pleased despite her surprise. "I had no idea you'd be here. The equestrian world is small." "No," he said, his Italian accent more pronounced, though his English remained perfect. "How have you been, my dear? It's been what, 5 years?" 8, Barbara corrected quietly. "Not since—" Understanding flashed across his features. "Of course 8 years. I'm so sorry, Barbara. Time has a way of blurring in my mind." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "And how is the farm? Whitmore Stable's still producing champions, I hope." Barbara hesitated, then decided there was no point in pretense. "It's been tough, to be honest. After Sophie, well, the heart went out of the business. I'm actually here hoping to secure some breeding partnerships to keep us afloat." Gregorio's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm truly sorry to hear that. You've always bred exceptional horses. I still speak of Richard's eye for bloodlines." "What about you?" Barbara asked, eager to shift the focus. "How's your place in Oregon? I heard you expanded." "Ah, yes," Gregorio nodded, gesturing expansively. "The Oregon property still operates, but it's just one of several now. I have establishments in Kentucky, France, and here in Italy. Keeps me traveling constantly." His smile turned rueful. "The price of success, I suppose." His kindness and familiar charm made Barbara realize how isolated she'd become in her grief. Gregorio had always had that effect, making people feel at ease. "I never properly thanked you," Barbara said suddenly, "for everything you did during the search for Sophie, the way you coordinated with the police, organized volunteers." Gregorio waved a dismissive hand. "Please. It was nothing. I only wish we could have—" He trailed off. "The police never did figure out what happened in those woods, did they?" Barbara shook her head. "The hoof prints led nowhere. Pieces of torn tack suggested some kind of struggle or accident, but with both Sophie and Willow missing, she swallowed hard. Some thought animal attack. Others suggested she got lost but without bodies. The familiar pain clutched at her heart. 8 years of not knowing was its own special kind of torture. Gregorio looked as though he might say more, but then his gaze shifted over Barbara's shoulder. "I believe your inspector has arrived at your stall. We shouldn't keep him waiting. These Italians are strict about their schedules." Barbara turned to see a uniformed official standing by Mira's stall, clipboard in hand. "I should go," she said. "It was good to see you, Gregorio." "Likewise, Barbara. Perhaps we can catch up properly later. I'm staying through the exhibition." With a nod and a smile, Barbara hurried back to her stall, her mind swirling, with memories and the strange coincidence of seeing Gregorio here, so far from home. Barbara returned to find her team standing anxiously beside Mira, the tack inspector already examining their saddle with meticulous care. "Mrs. Whitmore," he greeted her in heavily accented English. "Your equipment is very fine. Italian leather on the saddle?" "English, actually," Barbara replied, stepping forward to show him the maker's mark. The inspector nodded, approvingly, then proceeded to check every buckle, strap, and piece of metal on their tack, ensuring it complied with competition standards. As he worked, he explained the day's schedule. "You have 20 minutes in warm-up ring 3 beginning, at 11:00. The exhibition class starts at 11:30 in the covered arena. Judges will evaluate movement, presence, and handling. Not a competitive class, strictly speaking, but important for the breeding evaluations." He made several notations on his clipboard. "Your papers are in order. Good luck, Mrs. Whitmore." After he left, Barbara huddled with her team to discuss strategy. Due to her persistent sciatica, a painful reminder of a fall she'd taken shortly after Sophie's disappearance, Barbara no longer rode in competitions. Maya would be in the saddle today, a responsibility the young woman took very seriously. "Remember, this isn't about winning ribbons," Barbara reminded her. "The judges are looking for breeding quality, bone structure, movement, temperament. Let her move naturally so they can see her true gait." Maya nodded, already dressed in her tailored show jacket and pristine white breeches. "I'll keep the warm-up light, just enough to loosen her up without tiring her." They led Mira to the designated warm-up ring, where Maya mounted with practiced grace. As she began to walk the mare in large circles, Barbara stood at the rail, watching with a critical eye. Around them, other horses and riders executed complex movements, extended trots, collected canters, half-passes that showcased years of training. Judges and potential sponsors wandered between the rings, making notes and discussing the merits of various horses in hushed tones. But Barbara's attention was suddenly drawn to a horse being led to an adjacent ring. Her heart seemed to stumble in her chest. The horse was a bay pinto with distinctive white markings, a rich reddish-brown coat accented with patches of white on its hindquarters and between its eyes. Something about its conformation, the way it moved with collected energy and grace, struck Barbara as hauntingly familiar. Without thinking, she approached the handler, a young Italian groom who stood at attention beside the horse. "Excuse me," Barbara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This horse is beautiful. Who does it belong to?" The man looked Barbara over, seemingly assessing whether she warranted a response before answering. "This is Eternal. She belongs to Mrs. Duca, the wife of Mr. Gregorio Duca." "Gregorio's wife?" Barbara echoed, surprised. In all the years she'd known Gregorio, she'd never met his spouse, despite numerous dinner invitations to their Oregon property. "Yes," the handler confirmed. "Mrs. Bella Duca. She is there." He gestured toward a shaded gazebo where a slender woman in large sunglasses sat alone, a glass of white wine in her hand. "Mr. Duca will ride Eternal in the exhibition. Class later," the handler added. "Special showcase, not for competition." "Thank you," Barbara murmured, continuing to study the horse, the markings, the conformation, even the way the horse tossed its head impatiently. It all reminded her so powerfully of Willow that it made her chest ache. But it couldn't be Willow. That was impossible. Willow had disappeared in the Oregon woods 8 years ago, thousands of miles from here. "Ms. Whitmore?" Maya called from the ring. Should I take her into a working trot now? Barbara forced her attention back to her own horse and rider. Yes, start your warm-up sequence. I'll be right there. After ensuring Maya had Mira well in hand for the warm-up, Barbara decided to approach Gregorio's wife. If nothing else, common courtesy suggested she should introduce herself, given her long history with Gregorio. The elegant woman sat alone, under the gazebo, seemingly indifferent to the prestigious equestrian activities surrounding her. Her designer sunglasses obscured her eyes, and her posture, one leg crossed over the other, wineglass held loosely in manicured fingers, suggested both refinement and boredom. "Excuse me," Barbara said as she approached. "I hope I'm not intruding. I'm Barbara Whitmore." The woman tilted her head slightly but didn't remove her sunglasses. "I'm an old friend of Gregorio's from Oregon. Our farms were neighbors for many years." "Ah," the woman's voice held the faintest trace of an accent Barbara couldn't quite place. "Yes, Gregorio has many friends." Barbara hesitated, taken aback by the cool response. "I don't believe we've ever met, despite all the dinners Gregorio hosted when my husband was alive." "I spend most of my time in Italy," the woman replied, taking a deliberate sip of her wine. "My husband travels for business. I rarely accompany him to America." There was something dismissive in her tone that made Barbara consider retreating, but she persisted, gesturing toward the nearby ring. "Your horse, Eternal, is absolutely stunning. The markings are remarkably similar to my daughter's horse, from years ago." At the mention of the horse, a subtle tension seemed to enter the woman's posture. "Thank you," she said, "but as I told the officials, we're not here for the competition, just the exhibition." Barbara nodded, studying the horse again. "May I ask how old she is?" "The resemblance to my daughter's horse is quite striking." The woman shifted in her seat, her discomfort now obvious. "I'm not sure, to be honest. Gregorio gave her to me as a gift, perhaps 7 or 8 years ago." She waved a hand vaguely. "I'm not particularly interested in the technical aspects." "I see," Barbara said, even as her mind calculated the timeline. 8 years ago, exactly when Sophie and Willow had disappeared. "I should find my husband," the woman said abruptly, rising from her seat. "He gets distracted at these events." As she stood, Barbara caught the direction of her gaze through the tinted glasses, focused across the grounds where Gregorio stood surrounded by a small crowd, including several young women with cameras. "You never know with men," the woman added, with a coldness that belied her attempt at humor. "One minute they're taking pictures, the next it's dinner, and then, you know." She made a dismissive gesture with her fingers. The bitterness in her voice caught Barbara off guard. This didn't sound like a happily married woman. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name," Barbara said. "Bella," the woman replied. "Bella Duca." Without further conversation, Bella walked away, her stride purposeful as she headed toward her husband. Barbara watched as Bella approached Gregorio, who immediately put his arm around her for a photo opportunity, his smile never wavering. But, even from a distance, Barbara could sense the performative nature of their interaction. Something about their relationship struck her as deeply wrong, a facade maintained for public consumption that masked a more complex reality. As Barbara turned to rejoin her team, her mind kept returning to Eternal. The timing, the distinctive markings, it seemed too coincidental. But what would Gregorio be doing with her daughter's missing horse? The very idea was absurd. Barbara returned to the warm-up ring just as Maya was concluding Mira's preparation. The mare moved beautifully, her strides fluid and powerful, exactly what the judges would be looking for in breeding stock. "She's ready," Maya reported as she walked Mira to the rail, responsive and forward without being too hot. Barbara nodded, then noticed a pair of judges standing nearby, making notes as they observed various horses. She approached them with a professional smile. "Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Barbara Whitmore of Whitmore Stables." The older of the two judges, a distinguished-looking man with a silver mustache, inclined his head. "Ah, yes. From Oregon, correct? We're just admiring your mare." "Thank you," Barbara replied. "She represents our best breeding program, though I'll admit our farm has faced challenges in recent years." We're hoping to secure partnerships to continue our work. We're aware, the judge replied. Your application was quite candid about your financial situation. It's precisely why the Federation extended the invitation, to help preserve bloodlines that might otherwise be lost due to economic factors rather than quality issues. His colleague, younger but equally observant, added, You should prepare to bring your horse into the indoor arena soon. The exhibition class begins in 10 minutes. As they walked toward the covered arena, Barbara remained by Mira's side, offering quiet encouragement to both horse and rider. The exhibition space was magnificent, a vast climate-controlled structure with perfect footing and tiered seating for spectators. While waiting for their turn, Barbara noticed Eternal being led toward the arena by a handler, neither Bella nor Gregorio in sight. The horse's resemblance to Willow continued to nag at her. Deciding to use this opportunity to network, Barbara approached a group of breeders gathered near the entrance. Before she could introduce herself, however, she overheard snippets of their conversation. His wife seemed quite upset, probably because he increased his charitable donation without consulting her. No, I think it's because she wanted to take Eternal home early. Barbara slowed her approach, realizing they were discussing the Dukas. She changed direction, uncomfortable with the idea of joining a gossip session about people she knew, especially when one had once been a close family friend. As she turned away, she spotted Bella standing alone near the refreshment table, another glass of white wine in hand. The woman's posture radiated tension and isolation. Against her better judgment, Barbara approached her again. Hello. I'm not in the mood for small talk. Bella cut her off immediately, her voice low but sharp. Barbara paused, taken aback by the bluntness. I'm sorry to disturb you. Something in her tone must have conveyed genuine empathy because Bella's rigid posture softened slightly. No, I apologize. That was rude, she sighed. These events drain me. All these people, all the performance of it all. I understand, Barbara said. I've never been comfortable with the social aspects of the equestrian world. Either. My daughter was always the natural, charming judges, making friends with competitors. The mention of Sophie brought a familiar pang, but Barbara found herself continuing. She disappeared 8 years ago. We never found her. Bella removed her sunglasses, revealing tired eyes that held genuine sympathy. I'm sorry. That's unimaginable. The moment of connection seemed to break through Bella's defensive wall. She took a large sip of wine, then said, Gregorio forced me to come today. He knows I hate these events. The media attention, the fake smiling. She leaned closer to Barbara. But this morning, he insisted, kept saying I needed to bring Eternal, claim her as my own. Barbara's interest sharpened. What do you mean claim her as your own? Bella glanced around, then lowered her voice. If I tell you something, you must promise not to repeat it. When Barbara nodded, she continued, Eternal isn't even my horse. I have my own mare, Nena, at our estate. But Gregorio insisted. I present this one as mine today, said something about showcasing our collection and how the horse is too exceptional to keep hidden away. Barbara's mind raced with implications. Why would Gregorio lie about the ownership of a horse? And why did that horse look so much like Willow? Before she could formulate a careful response, Bella grabbed her arm. Come with me. I need air. She finished her wine in one swift motion. Everyone thinks marrying money means freedom, but it's just a different kind of cage. The property, the income, it all comes with strings. Look at all this. Her voice dropped even lower. Sometimes I think I should just divorce him and be done with it. Without waiting for an answer, she pulled Barbara away from the exhibition hall into the bright Tuscan sunshine. Outside the exhibition hall, Bella moved with surprising purpose, Juan Bu Juan system. Purpose for someone so unsteady from drinking so much wine. She paused at a refreshment table to grab another glass, then pulled a small pill from her designer purse. Just my medication, she explained, catching Barbara's concerned look. Lorazepam, doctor's orders. Helps with... She waved her hand vaguely. All of this. She swallowed the pill with a sip of wine and gestured for Barbara to follow. Come, I want to show you something. They walked along a winding path away from the main exhibition area, toward a section marked with double VIP credentials and extra security. Bella nodded to the guards, who recognized her and let them pass without question. The exclusive area featured private viewing boxes and luxury stabling for horses belonging to the wealthiest owners and sponsors. Bella led Barbara along the perimeter, then suddenly pulled her behind a decorative hedge. "Look there," she whispered, pointing toward a secluded stable entrance. Barbara peeked around the foliage and felt her breath catch. Gregorio stood in conversation with the young blonde girl Barbara had noticed earlier, the one brushing the Palomino horse. Up close, Barbara could see the girl was even younger than she'd first appeared, maybe just 15. Gregorio's body language was unmistakable, one arm propped against the stable wall beside the girl's head, leaning down to speak to her with an intimacy that made Barbara's skin crawl. "That can't be legal," Barbara whispered, horrified. "She's clearly underage." Bella laughed bitterly. "This is Italy. The age of consent is different here. Besides, who would challenge Gregorio Duca, the great philanthropist, the job creator, the savior of struggling communities?" Before Barbara could respond, Bella tugged her away. "Now you understand why I hate him," she muttered as they retreated down the path. "Let's go back before they see us." Barbara's mind raced as they returned to the exhibition hall. The implications of what she'd witnessed, combined with the strange coincidence of Eternal's resemblance to Willow, painted a disturbing picture she wasn't sure how to process. Should she report Gregorio to the event organizers? To the police? But what would she say? That he was speaking too closely to a young girl? That his horse resembled one that disappeared in America 8 years ago? That his wife, who seemed unstable and possibly over-medicated, made vague accusations? As they re-entered the hall, Bella veered toward the stall where Eternal stood. Horse's ears pricked forward as they approached, and Barbara was struck again by the familiar way it tossed its head, exactly as Willow used to do. "You said this horse reminds you of your daughters," Bella said abruptly. "The one that disappeared." "Yes," Barbara replied. "The markings are extraordinarily similar." Bella ran her hand along the horse's neck with detached affection. "You're the only person who's approached me today with genuine conversation rather than social obligation." She turned to Barbara with sudden intensity. "I like you. You brightened what would have been another miserable day of pretending." Before Barbara could respond, Bella announced, "The horse is yours." "What?" Barbara stared at her, in confusion. "Eternal. I'm giving her to you. Consider it a gift between friends." Barbara shook her head, stunned by the extraordinary offer. "I can't possibly accept. You said the horse isn't yours." "I don't care," Bella said, her smile sharp-edged. "He forced me to claim her as my own, so that's exactly what I'm doing, exercising my ownership by giving her to someone who'll appreciate her." Barbara approached the horse hesitantly, extending a hand toward its muzzle. To her surprise, Eternal leaned forward immediately, pressing her nose into Barbara's palm with familiar affection. Barbara spent the next hour in deep conversation, with Bella near Eternal's stall. The casual exchange gradually evolved into something more meaningful as Barbara shared the story of Sophie's disappearance and its devastating impact on her life. "She was 14, Barbara explained, her voice soft. "A natural with horses from the time she could walk. That morning was like any other. She took Willow for a trail ride in the woods behind our property. When she didn't return for lunch, I wasn't immediately worried, but by dinner." As Barbara spoke, she became increasingly aware of the many similarities between Willow and Eternal, not just in appearance, but in mannerisms. The way the horse kept nudging Barbara's shoulder, the distinctive nervous pawing when strangers approached. It seemed impossible that this could be Willow, yet each passing moment strengthened Barbara's suspicion. If this was indeed Sophie's horse, what did that mean? How had Willow ended up in Italy in Gregorio's possession? And what might that suggest about Sophie's fate? The implications were too frightening to fully consider. Their conversation was interrupted by someone clearing their throat. Both women turned to find Gregorio standing behind them, his expression carefully neutral as he adjusted his silk tie. There you are, cara mia, he said to Bella, leaning down to kiss her cheek. If he noticed her slight recoil, he didn't acknowledge it. I've been looking for you. Gregorio, Bella replied with practiced sweetness. Barbara and I were just getting acquainted. I've decided to give her eternal as a token of friendship. The change in Gregorio's expression was subtle, but unmistakable. A momentary widening of the eyes, a slight tensing of the jaw before his features rearranged into confusion. You did what? He asked, his voice deceptively light. I gave eternal to Barbara, Bella repeated calmly. She admired her so much, and I wanted to offer something meaningful to honor our new friendship. Bella, Cara. Gregorio's voice dropped to a whisper, though his smile remained fixed. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, Bella countered. You told me to claim this horse, so she's mine to give away. But I told you, it's only for... Gregorio pressed his fingers to his temple, then stopped, unsure whether to go on. Barbara attempted to intervene. Gregorio, please, if this causes any problem... No, he interrupted, his charm reasserting itself, though his eyes remained cold. You're right, Bella. If this is what you want, then of course. He turned to his wife. You're right, Cara. The horse was yours. I just didn't expect... He trailed off as several nearby competitors glanced in their direction, clearly aware of the tension despite Gregorio's attempt to keep his voice down. Gregorio straightened, switching tactics. Well, it seems my wife has made a generous decision. Barbara, please accept this gift in the spirit of our long friendship. His smile broadened. And Bella, I have good news that might cheer you up. I found a new handler for our stable, young Alessia, whom you met earlier. Very talented with horses. Bella's expression hardened. She's a minor, Gregorio. No, he countered smoothly. She assured me she's 20, just small for her age. She doesn't look a day over 16, Bella insisted. Gregorio waved a dismissive hand. I'd never hire someone underage for such responsibilities. You know me better than that. The subtle undertone in his voice made Barbara's skin crawl. She glanced at Bella, who simply took another sip of wine, her eyes revealing her disbelief but her lips remaining sealed. Barbara, Gregorio said suddenly, turning his full attention to her. You must come visit our estate. It's just an hour's drive from here in Valdorcia. Beautiful countryside. Your team can stay here with your competition horse. They'll be well looked after. That's very kind, but I should stay for the exhibition, Barbara began. Nonsense, Bella interrupted, surprising her. The show's gotten tedious. I'm desperate to leave, and having you with us would make the afternoon bearable. Barbara hesitated, torn between her professional obligations and her growing certainty that something deeply wrong surrounded Gregorio Duca, something that might relate to Sophie's disappearance. All right, she agreed finally. I'll let my team know. As they walked toward the parking area, Barbara observed Gregorio speaking quietly to one of his staff, his gaze fixed on young Alicia across the grounds. The man nodded and headed in the girl's direction. Barbara's unease deepened. She climbed into the back of Gregorio's luxury SUV beside Bella, while Gregorio took the front passenger seat beside his driver. As they pulled away from the equestrian center, Barbara couldn't shake the feeling that she was either making the biggest mistake of her life or finally approaching the truth about what happened to her daughter 8 years ago. The drive to Valdorcia took them through some of Tuscany's most breathtaking landscapes, rolling hills dotted with cypress trees, ancient stone farmhouses, and vineyards stretching to the horizon. Under different circumstances, Barbara would have been captivated by the beauty. Instead, her mind swirled with questions and suspicions, the abrupt decision to hand over the horse, the unexpected invitation to the estate. She couldn't quite read Gregorio's intentions. Was she overanalyzing everything just because the horse looked so much like Willow, or was there something deeper going on that she hadn't yet uncovered? Welcome to Villa Duca, Gregorio announced proudly as the car turned onto a long cypress-lined driveway. Barbara gasped despite herself. Gregorio's estate was magnificent, a restored 16th-century villa perched on a hillside, surrounded, by meticulously maintained gardens, olive groves, and what appeared to be world-class equestrian facilities. Servants appeared immediately to open their doors. Barbara noticed that Bella barely acknowledged the staff as she headed straight for an outdoor seating area overlooking the horse paddocks. Gregorio led Barbara to join his wife, where a server quickly appeared with a tray of wine and light refreshments. "The estate has been in my family for generations," Gregorio explained, gesturing toward the surrounding property, "though I've made significant improvements to the equestrian facilities in recent years." Barbara nodded politely, accepting a glass of wine. "It's extraordinary. You must spend a lot of time here." "Not enough," Gregorio sighed. "Business keeps me traveling, but I try to return at least once a month." He glanced toward the drive, his attention seemingly divided. "Excuse me for a moment. I'm expecting an important delivery." As he walked away, Barbara noticed a van turning into the property. Gregorio moved to intercept it before it reached the main house. "Delivery," Bella scoffed, following Barbara's gaze. "I bet it's her, that Alessia girl, new handler, for the stables." Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "He thinks I don't know, but there have been others before her." Barbara studied the troubled woman beside her. "Bella, I don't mean to pry, but how do you tolerate it? His behavior with... you know what I mean." Bella's laugh was hollow. "You survive however you can. For me, it's this." She lifted her wine glass. "And these." She patted her purse, where Barbara had seen her store her medication. "You treat it like a job. Clock in, clock out, collect the benefits." The casual way she described Gregorio's predatory behavior chilled Barbara to the bone. "Shouldn't someone report him?" Barbara asked. "Report him to whom?" Bella countered. "The local police who receive generous donations from the Duca Family Foundation every year, the politicians who attend his charity galas, the journalists whose papers are kept afloat by his advertising." She set down her glass with surprising force. "Enough of this depressing talk. Let me show you the property." "It's actually quite beautiful when you ignore who owns it." They walked together through the manicured gardens and toward the stables, wine glasses still in hand. The equestrian facilities were state-of-the-art, spacious stalls with immaculate aisleways and every amenity a horse could need. As they passed one particular stable block, something caught Barbara's eye. Hanging beside one of the stall doors was a worn, dark brown leather saddle. Something about it triggered a memory. She approached it, while Bella was distracted by something on her phone. Barbara lifted the saddle slightly, examining it more closely. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw the small embossed lettering near the cantle. "Willow." The saddle slipped from her fingers, landing with a thud on the concrete aisle. "I'm so sorry," she stammered as Bella looked up. "Don't worry about it," Bella said, eyeing the saddle with disinterest. "That careless handler shouldn't have left equipment lying around anyway." She frowned. "Wait here. I need to find that woman and remind her how things work here." As Bella walked away, Barbara's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She quickly snapped a photo of the saddle, then attached it along with a picture of Eternal she had taken during the competition. Without hesitation, she sent both images to Detective Morris in Oregon, the lead investigator on Sophie's case who had stayed in touch with her over the years. She tried calling him immediately, but the call went to voicemail. A few moments later, a text came through. "Sorry, in a meeting." "What's up?" Barbara sent a voice message, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm in Italy at an equestrian event. I found Willow's saddle at Gregorio Duca's estate. The horse I told you about, Eternal. I'm certain the saddle belongs to her. It's Willow. Gregorio insists the horse belongs to someone else, but he wouldn't say who. I have a strong feeling Sophie might be here. Something about this place feels very wrong." The detective's response came quickly. "If confirmed, this changes everything. We'll coordinate with FBI for international action. Be extremely careful. If Duca has connections to transport a horse internationally without raising flags, he likely has law enforcement connections. Don't trust local police. This will take time to arrange properly." Barbara's mind raced. If Willow's saddle was here, and Eternal was indeed Willow, what did that mean for Sophie? The presence of her daughter's horse intact suggested a terrifying possibility. that Gregorio might somehow be involved in Sophie's disappearance. She couldn't wait for the FBI. She might never get this chance again. Barbara looked around, noting that Bella had disappeared from sight. Taking a deep breath, she decided to investigate further on her own. Moving with deliberate casualness, Barbara walked deeper into the stable complex, past the main buildings toward what appeared to be residential quarters. A modest farmhouse stood separate from the grand villa, likely housing for stable staff and handlers. She approached it cautiously, glancing over her shoulder to ensure she wasn't being observed. The door was unlocked, common in such a remote private property. Inside, she found a simple common area with a kitchenette and several doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. One door stood slightly ajar. Barbara hesitated, then pushed it open further, peering inside. The small room was sparsely furnished, a narrow bed, a dresser, a simple desk. But what caught her attention was a photograph on the nightstand. Her knees nearly buckled as she recognized Sophie, her Sophie smiling from the frame. The photo was recent, showing a young woman in her early 20s, not the 14-year-old girl who had disappeared. A crash from somewhere nearby startled her. Barbara froze, listening intently. Another crash followed, accompanied by a muffled voice coming from outside. She moved to the window and saw a small barn adjacent to the farmhouse. As she slipped out of the room, a young staff member appeared in the corridor, his eyes widening at the sight of her. "Ma'am, you cannot be here," he said in heavily accented English. "Mrs. Bella is looking for you. Please, I'll show you back." "I heard a noise," Barbara said, gesturing toward the barn. "Someone might need help." No, the young man insisted, reaching for her arm. "Please, this area is private for staff only." Barbara ignored him, driven by an instinct stronger than caution. She pushed past him and hurried toward the barn. The door wasn't locked. She pulled it open to find Gregorio pressing a dark-haired young woman against the wall. Both turned at her entrance, startled by the interruption. The young staff member arrived behind Barbara, breathless from trying to catch up. "I'm sorry, Mr. Duca," he stammered. "I tried to—" "It's fine, Dario," Gregorio interrupted, his voice eerily calm. "She was meant to find us eventually. Go back to the house. Tell Augusto to attend to Lady Bella. He'll understand." The young man hesitated briefly, then retreated, closing the door behind him. Gregorio moved with surprising speed for a man his age. Before Barbara could react, he struck her across the face with an open palm. The blow sent her stumbling backward, momentarily disoriented. By the time she regained her balance, he had seized a length of rope and was advancing toward her. "You always were too curious for your own good, Barbara," he said, his cultured voice now cold and flat. "Always asking questions, always looking for explanations. Richard understood discretion. You never did." Barbara backed away but found herself against the barn wall. "What have you done with my daughter?" Gregorio smiled as he grabbed her wrists, binding them together with practiced efficiency. "Done with her? I've given her opportunities she never would have had in your little farm in Oregon." He secured the rope to a metal ring embedded in the wall, effectively immobilizing her. It was then that Barbara focused on the young woman with dark hair who remained pressed against the opposite wall, tears streaming down her face. At first glance, Barbara didn't recognize her. The black hair was so different from Sophie's natural blonde, but as their eyes met, recognition dawned. "Sophie," Barbara whispered, her voice breaking. "Oh my God, Sophie!" The young woman nodded almost imperceptibly, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and desperate hope. Rage coursed through Barbara as she turned to Gregorio. "You kidnapped my daughter. You've kept her prisoner for 8 years. Gregorio laughed, the sound laced with chilling sincerity. "Kidnapped? Such an ugly word. I gave her opportunities, Barbara. A luxurious home. The horse she adored. I kept Willow for her. She's been homeschooled, exposed to culture, refinement." He swept his arm around the lavish room like a showman unveiling his masterpiece. "Look around you. Isn't this a far cry from that failing little farm you once called a future? She was a stable hand, nothing more. I offered to train her, to sponsor her, if she chose to stay with me. After all, Bella's getting old and more useless by the day. You stole her life, Barbara spat. Her freedom, her childhood. I gave her a better life, Gregorio countered. Ask her. Sophie, tell your mother how well you've been treated. Sophie's voice was barely audible. I did what I had to do to survive, to keep Willow safe. You see? Gregorio smiled. She adapted. They always do. How? Barbara demanded. How did you take her without anyone seeing? Gregorio leaned against a workbench, seemingly pleased to explain his cleverness. It was remarkably simple. I'd been planning it for months, ever since I first saw Sophie at that junior dressage competition when she was 12. Such extraordinary talent, such natural grace. His eyes took on a disturbing gleam as he continued. That day, I followed her into the woods in my trailer, telling the stable hands I was visiting a breeder nearby. When she reached the most isolated section of the trail, I approached her as a friend, someone she trusted. The sedative in the water I offered her worked quickly. Willow was more difficult. Had to be tranquilized separately. He described the meticulous details of his plan, creating false evidence of a potential accident, deliberately leaving torn pieces of tack and misleading hoof prints. He'd transported Sophie and Willow to a private airfield, where his connections ensured no questions were asked about the sedated girl or horse. Falsified documents are simple when you have the right contacts, he explained casually. Sophie became my niece, traumatized by a family tragedy, coming to Italy for specialized therapy. Willow was simply an expensive import with slightly irregular paperwork. Money smooths over so many complications. Barbara fought against her restraints, sick with the realization that all those years ago, while she was frantically searching the woods with police and volunteers, Gregorio had been beside her, pretending to help while knowing exactly what had happened to Sophie. For 8 years, she said, her voice shaking, you've kept my daughter prisoner, made me believe she was dead. How could you do that to someone you called a friend? Friendship had nothing to do with it, Gregorio replied dismissively. I wanted Sophie from the moment I saw her ride. The rest was simply logistics. And what about Bella? Barbara demanded. Your wife knows, doesn't she? About the girls? Gregorio shrugged. Bella only understands the arrangement. She lives in luxury, travels as she pleases, and maintains her social position. In exchange, she looks the other way regarding my particular interests. He turned to Sophie with a possessive smile. Sophie has been quite cooperative over the years, haven't you, Kara? Especially once she realized resistance only made things worse for Willow. Sophie's eyes flashed with momentary defiance. I only did what was necessary to survive and protect Willow. I gained your trust so I could find a way to get word out. Today was my first chance, convincing you to bring Willow to the show where someone might recognize her. Gregorio laughed. A desperate plan that nearly worked. I underestimated your mother's connection to that horse. He sighed theatrically. And now, unfortunately, adjustments must be made. The barn door opened again, and Barbara was horrified to see young Alessia enter, her eyes wide with confusion. Ah, perfect timing, Gregorio said. Come in, Alessia. Close the door. Barbara strained against her bonds. She's just a child, Gregorio. How many girls have you taken? Taken? Gregorio appeared genuinely offended. I offer opportunities, employment, training with the finest horses in Europe. If additional arrangements develop, that's simply the nature of mutual benefit. He motioned for Alessia to stand beside Sophie. Now, since you've gone and complicated things, Barbara, we'll have to move today's plans along a bit faster. Gregorio drew a gun from inside his jacket, but before he could raise it toward Barbara, the barn door burst open. Bella stood in the entrance, her stance steady, a small pistol gripped firmly in her hand. She pulled the trigger. That's enough, Gregorio, she said, her voice remarkably calm. Her gaze swept the scene, taking in Barbara tied to the wall, Sophie and Alessia standing together, and her husband's surprised expression. Bella, cara mia, Gregorio said soothingly, raising his hand slightly. You're not thinking clearly. You should find Augusto. He has your medication ready. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, Bella replied, stepping into the barn and closing the door behind her. She kept the gun aimed at Gregorio's chest. I've suspected for years, you know. The special trainees who came and went, the private quarters I wasn't allowed to visit. But I told myself it wasn't my business, that the lifestyle was worth the compromise. Her hand remained steady as she continued. But seeing you today with that girl at the show, watching you parade around with your charitable donations while destroying young lives, and now hurting my friend, don't be dramatic, Gregorio said, his tone hardening. Put the gun down before you do something you'll regret. The only thing I regret is not doing this years ago, Bella replied. The gunshot echoed through the barn, startling everyone. Gregorio staggered backward and dropped his gun, clutching his chest where blood rapidly spread across his expensive shirt. He looked down at the wound with genuine surprise before collapsing to his knees. Bella immediately moved to untie Barbara, her hands trembling but determined. We need to get out of here. His security staff will have heard the shot. As soon as Barbara was free, she rushed to Sophie, enveloping her daughter in a desperate embrace. 8 years of grief and longing poured out in wrenching sobs as she clung to the child she'd thought was lost forever. Mom, Sophie whispered, her own tears flowing freely. I never stopped hoping you'd find me. Their reunion was cut short when Gregorio, still conscious despite his wound, reached for his gun. Before anyone could react, he fired a single shot. Bella collapsed, a bullet wound to her head sending her crumpling to the floor in a terrible finality. Gregorio turned the gun toward Barbara and Sophie, his eyes wild with fury. Run! Sophie cried, grabbing Barbara's arm. They bolted out of the barn, feet pounding against the earth. Behind them, Gregorio's enraged voice echoed through the air. If I can't have her, no one will. A gunshot rang out, but his strength faltered. The bullet went wide. The weapon slipped from his grasp and clattered to the floor as he collapsed, forward, blood spreading beneath him in a dark, widening pool. We have to go, Barbara said urgently, pulling Sophie toward the door. Alessia, come with us. It's not safe here. The three of them fled the barn, emerging into the bright Tuscan sunshine that seemed obscenely beautiful against the horror they'd just witnessed. They ran across the grounds toward the staff quarters where they'd encountered the young man. Earlier. Dario, Sophie called out as they approached. Dario, please help us. The young staff member, Dario, emerged from the building, his eyes widening at the sight of their distress. What's happened? He asked, looking from Sophie to Barbara and the trembling Alessia. Gregorio shot Bella, Barbara explained breathlessly. He tried to shoot us too. We need to get away from here now. Dario's face paled. The police. They're all in his pocket, Sophie interrupted. Please, Dario, you know what kind of man he is, Sophie pleaded. If you stay, you'll be implicated too. Indecision flickered across his features before determination set in. My car's this way. He led them to a modest Fiat parked behind the staff building. They piled in, Barbara and Sophie in the back, Alessia in the front passenger seat, and Dario accelerated down the service drive that circumvented the main entrance. As they sped away from the estate, Barbara pulled out her phone and called. Detective Morris again. This time he answered immediately. Barbara, are you all right? No, she replied, her voice shaking. I found Sophie. She's alive. She's with me. But there's been a shooting. Gregorio Duca shot his wife and he's been shot too. We're fleeing the estate now. The detective's tone changed instantly to one of urgent professionalism. Where are you heading? The police station in Siena, I think, Barbara said, looking to Dario for confirmation. He nodded without taking his eyes off the winding road. That's good, Morris replied. I've already contacted our FBI attaché in Rome and the State Department. They're reaching out to the Italian authorities now. This is going to become an international incident. Barbara, I need you to go directly to the police. Don't stop anywhere else. I'll make sure they're expecting you. What about Gregorio's influence with the local police? Barbara asked. That's why we've involved federal authorities and the embassy, Morris explained. This is too big for local cover-ups now. Stay on the line with me until you reach the station. As they rounded a curve in the road, they passed several police cars and an ambulance speeding in the opposite direction toward the Duca estate. Barbara felt a surge of relief. At least emergency services had been called, which meant someone at the estate had reported the shootings. "Do you think Bella could survive?" she asked Sophie quietly, covering the phone's microphone. Sophie shook her head, her eyes haunted. The shot was point blank to her head. And Gregorio, he was losing so much blood. Barbara nodded grimly and returned to her conversation with Morris, updating him on what they'd just seen. "The embassy will send someone to meet you at the police station," he assured her. "Don't sign anything or make any formal statements until they arrive. Just explain that you're American citizens involved in a serious incident and waiting for consular assistance." The drive to Siena seemed both interminable and too brief. Barbara kept her arm around Sophie, unable to believe that after 8 years of grief and searching, her daughter was really here beside her. "I never gave up," Barbara whispered. "Not really. Even when everyone told me to accept that you were gone." Sophie leaned against her mother's shoulder. "I knew if anyone could find me, it would be you. That's why I begged Gregorio to bring Willow to the show. I thought maybe, somehow—" "Willow," Barbara remembered suddenly. "She's safe," Sophie assured her. "Bella really did give her to you. Once we sort this out with the authorities, you'll be able to claim her officially." Barbara marveled at the strange twist of fate that had reunited her not only with her daughter, but with Sophie's beloved horse as well. They arrived at the Siena police station, a modern building that stood in stark contrast to the medieval architecture surrounding it. Dario parked the car and turned to them with serious eyes. "I'll come with you," he said, "to tell what I know about Mr. Duca. It's time someone speaks the truth." Together, the four of them entered the station. The desk sergeant looked up, his expression changing as Barbara asked for someone, who spoke English and mentioned they were expected. Within minutes they were separated and led to different interview rooms. Before being parted from Sophie, Barbara embraced her tightly. "I won't let them separate us again," she promised. "Not ever." The fluorescent lights of the interview room cast harsh shadows as Barbara recounted everything to the Italian detective assigned to her case. She explained how she'd come to Italy for the equestrian exhibition, her chance reunion with Gregorio, the discovery of Willow, and ultimately finding Sophie held captive for 8 years. The detective, Inspector Rossi, took meticulous notes, his expression revealing nothing as she described Gregorio's confession and the subsequent shootings. "Mrs. Duca shot her husband and then he shot her," he clarified. "Yes," Barbara confirmed. "She was trying to help us escape. She'd realized what kind of man she was married to." Inspector Rossi nodded. "We've received updates from the hospital. Mr. Duca is in critical condition. He's lost a lot of blood. The doctors aren't optimistic." "And Bella?" Barbara asked, though she already knew the answer from Sophie's description of the wound. "Mrs. Duca did not survive," the inspector confirmed solemnly. "The gunshot was fatal." Barbara closed her eyes briefly, a complicated mixture of grief and gratitude washing over her. Bella, a deeply troubled woman trapped in her own kind of prison, had given her life to save them. "What happens now?" Barbara asked. "That depends partly on whether Mr. Duca survives," Inspector Rossi explained. "But regardless, there'll be a thorough investigation. Your daughter's testimony about her abduction, the false documentation, the years of captivity, these are extremely serious crimes." A knock at the door interrupted them. Another officer entered and spoke quietly to Inspector Rossi in Italian before departing. "A representative from your embassy has arrived," the inspector informed her. "And the FBI has contacted us directly about your case. This has become quite significant, Mrs. Whitmore." "I just want to take my daughter home," Barbara said simply. "That may take some time," Inspector Rossi cautioned. "There are statements to complete, evidence to process, and if Mr. Duca survives, there'll likely be a trial, though perhaps not for many months. Will we have to stay in Italy all that time?" "No, I don't believe so. With international cooperation, arrangements can be made for testimony via video link if necessary. But for now, you'll need to remain available for at least several days while the initial investigation proceeds." Another officer appeared with coffee and water, which Barbara accepted gratefully. Her phone buzzed with messages from her team at the equestrian center, concerned about her whereabouts. She quickly texted them back that she was safe and would explain everything later. A new message with an attached photo caught her attention. A beautiful image of Willow, or Eternal as she had been called, standing contentedly in a temporary stall at the competition venue, being tended to by Barbara's grooms. The sight of the horse, Sophie's horse, who had been taken alongside her all those years ago, brought fresh tears to Barbara's eyes. Against all odds, her family was being reunited. Hours later, after extensive statements, documentation, and coordination with the American embassy, Barbara was finally allowed to reunite with Sophie in a small waiting area. They fell into each other's arms, holding tight as if afraid they might be separated again. "The embassy representative says we can stay at a hotel they recommend," Barbara explained. "We'll be under protection there until everything's sorted out." Sophie nodded against her mother's shoulder. "What about Alessia and the others at the estate?" "The police are interviewing everyone," Barbara assured her. "Inspector Rossi said they're bringing in special investigators who handle trafficking and exploitation cases. Alessia will be taken care of, I promise." They sat together on a hard bench, hands clasped, as embassy officials completed paperwork for their temporary accommodation. Sophie looked exhausted, the years of captivity evident in the shadows beneath her eyes, and the weariness with which she observed everyone around them. "Do you think he'll die?" Sophie asked quietly. Barbara considered her answer carefully. "The inspector said it doesn't look good, but regardless of whether he survives, he'll never hurt you or anyone else again. There's too much evidence now, too many witnesses." Sophie nodded slowly. "I should feel relieved, I know, but mostly I just feel empty. Like I've been holding my breath for 8 years, and I don't remember how to breathe normally." "It'll take time," Barbara said, squeezing her daughter's hand. "We'll find help. Therapists who specialize in trauma recovery. There's no rush, no timetable for healing." "What about the farm? Is it still—" "It's struggling," Barbara admitted. "But it's still ours. And now that you're coming home, now that we'll have Willow back—" She smiled. "Despite her exhaustion, we'll rebuild together." Sophie rested her head on her mother's shoulder, a gesture so familiar yet so long absent that it made Barbara's heart ache. "I never stopped looking for you," Barbara whispered. "Even when everyone told me to accept that you were gone, even when I could barely function through the grief, some part of me kept searching." "I never stopped hoping you'd find me," Sophie replied. "Even in the darkest moments, I held on to that." As they sat together in that sterile police station waiting room, surrounded by the chaos of an international investigation, Barbara felt a sense of peace settle over her for the first time in 8 years. The road ahead would be difficult. Recovery from trauma, legal proceedings, rebuilding their lives, but they would face it together. Detective Morris called again to check on them, promising continued support from the American authorities and expressing his relief that Sophie had been found alive. Barbara updated him briefly, then returned her attention to her daughter. "The event organizers are arranging transport for Willow back to Oregon," Barbara told Sophie, showing her the photo on her phone. "She'll be waiting for us when we get home." Sophie touched the screen gently, tears filling her eyes at the sight of her beloved horse. "She recognized you at the show, didn't she?" Barbara nodded. "Some connections can't be broken, no matter how much time passes." As embassy officials approached to escort them to their hotel, Barbara and Sophie stood together, arms around each other. They had survived the unimaginable, separation, captivity, violence, and emerged on the other side, changed but unbroken. Outside the police station, the ancient city of Siena continued its timeless rhythms, church bells marking the hour, tourists strolling through picturesque streets, locals going about their business. The contrast between the medieval beauty surrounding them and the modern horror they had endured was stark. Yet, as they stepped into the waiting embassy car, Barbara felt hope rising within her. Hope for healing, for justice, for the future that had been stolen and was now, against all odds, returned to them. The nightmare that had begun 8 years ago in the Oregon woods was finally ending here in the rolling hills of Tuscany. The path forward would not be easy, but they would walk it together, mother, daughter, and the horse, that had somehow helped bring them back to each other. In the midst of tragedy and evil, they had found their way back to one another. And that, Barbara knew, was nothing short of a miracle. Thanks for sticking with the story until the end. If you enjoyed it, give this a like and share if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.